Hello everybody! So I've spent the last week solving all of humanity's dire problems such as war, hunger or peak oil, because in essence I want to be remembered as someone who launched humanity in the new golden age and laid the foundation that launched us to the stars. However, as I was finishing the job on getting the depletion of ozone layer being fixed, this happened.
Ever wondered how the pros change gears so quickly and seem to jump on any acceleration during a race? Well, we're going to show you just how. Here are our top tips to get you changing gear like a pro.
And so I thought to myself, this cannot be. Someone is wrong on the internet. So I scrapped all that work because it was not important anymore. I need to address this. I need to answer to GCN. So, GCN being a quasi-advertisement network or a popular cycling channel, quite often post these videos that are how to something something something. And recently they posted a video how to shift like a pro, or how to use your gears like a pro, starring Connor Dunn. And unfortunately in this video they repeated all the popular myths about using your drivetrain. And considering that I am a little bit obsessed with this subject, I would like to straighten a few things they've gotten wrong. And they've gotten wrong quite a bit. So I'm going to post a little clip and answer to it.
Try to pay close attention to the line of your chain when you're riding. You don't want a really aggressive angle on that chain.
So, cross-chaining, very popular subject. Let me start by saying that Mr. Dunn's bike has its chain too short. Not that it matters in his example, because he has electronic shifting with all the limiters set on, so he can't really shift to the big combination without turning it off, because in normal usage the electronics is not going to allow this. However, if you are set up your bike in this particular way, you are risking two major things. One, the distance between the tension pulley and your chainring is extremely short, which runs the chain at a very awkward angle, and that's noisy and might rub on the derailleur cage, and you are going to wear the tension pulley pretty fast. So you probably should add at least two links to what he shows in the video. However, cross-chaining is a practice of using the gear of the outermost chainring and the innermost cog on the cassette, or vice versa, because the chain crosses from the outer side of the drivetrain at the front to the inner side at the back, or vice versa. We call it cross-chaining. That's the term used in the cycling folklore. Now, this method, 40 years ago, when we were using 10-piece chains, which are constructed in a different way to the modern 8-piece chains. I'm not going to go into technical details why it matters. However, since mid-80s, when a French company Sadis, which were then later became a part of Saks, which were later became a part of SRAM, produced a chain which is constructed in a different way. It's made of 8 pieces per link. This chain is very friendly to the derailleur gears because it is quite laterally flexible, unlike the 10-piece chain which was used earlier. And just about any modern chain used today is 8-piece. They are simpler to manufacture and much more friendly to derailleur gears. What's more important about 8-piece chains is that they are very flexible laterally, as I mentioned before, which means that they are much friendlier to using cross-chained gears. So much that today we are using 1x drivetrain with 12 cogs at the back, and we are routinely riding gears that would be unthinkable 40 years ago. The deflection of a chain on a typical 1x drivetrain is almost 25 millimeters. That's entire width of a 6-speed cluster of 35 years ago. And 35 years ago, everyone would once again forbid you from using the cross-chaining. So what changed? Technology advanced, of course. Modern derailleur chains, especially 11, 12 speed, are much more flexible than 40 years ago, which means that you can run them cross-chained all day long without suffering much of an issue. Of course, it still remains true that if you are going to ride the ladder chain gears with the cogs not being planar, so offset a little bit, you're going to suffer from a little bit of a faster chain wear, faster cog wear, and a little bit of a power loss, because you're wearing something extra. That's power loss always. However, on a modern bicycle you are going to suffer from mechanical problems much faster. Oh, by the way, this is the core issue with the backpedaling problems of any kind. Anyhow, you're going to suffer from mechanical problems much faster than the faster chain wear, and power loss are going to be significant. Without going into details, if you want me to go into details, send a comment. Without going into details, an average power loss of running on the extreme chainline cross, which is the big ring, big cog, on an 11-speed drivetrain or 12-speed as well, is approximately 0.3-0.4 of a watt at about 200 watts of input power. That's not significant. However, what you're getting is the ergonomy, because you don't want to be switching front rings if you don't have to, because the rear derailleur has much easier job of changing gears than the front.
You want to think in advance about what gear you want to be in on the climb and make those changes before you actually get on the climb.
What Mr. Dunn is talking about here is usually discussed under the term shifting under power, or more specifically should be called shifting under tension, because in essence the more tensioned a chain is, the more difficult it is to shift. It was important 50 years ago because we would then be using friction shifting, which has a very interesting property that you can get to the lever, and with a one swift move you can go through the entire cassette. You can go from the smallest cog to the biggest cog and back in a matter of seconds. The problem is that before the age of HG shifting ramps or index shifting or all that magic that has been put into modern cassettes, well, that might cause the chain being lodged between two cogs, and if that would happen and you would push forward, you would break your chain. Now this is technically speaking still a problem, or this technically speaking can still happen, but if you are maintaining your drivetrain correctly, it shouldn't happen. Modern drivetrains can shift, at least shift the rear, under a ridiculous amount of tension without an issue. Let me show you that in a finer detail. Alright, so this is an in vivo example. This is a new Sunshine 1134 12-speed cassette. This is a new Shimano SLX 12-speed chain. Now, imagine this is a working drivetrain, this is a powered or tensioned chain, and you are pulling here with a force of 1000 Newtons. Now, if you are not shifting, everything works fine. If you are shifting, first the derailleur is going to push the chain towards the cog you're shifting to. Let us assume that you're doing just one step. And then there's a pocket here which has to line up with the chain below the derailleur. This is going to allow the chain to be gently put to the next cog, like this one. And as the entire thing rotates, now the derailleur is keeping the chain on the new cog already, and the shift has been already engaged. Now all it has to happen is that as you're pulling here, the chain is going to be gently released. The chain is going to be gently released from the old cog here. It doesn't matter how tensioned the chain here, you can pull here with 5000 watts. It's going to work perfectly all the time, because that's the feature of the HG shifting system and all of its derivatives for the last 40 years. Now take a look what I've done here. I have routed the chain from the 34 all the way to the 24, I think it's 24. And this is the power of a modern shifting system, the timed shift gates. Because power transfer on a cassette is actually happening only on the 5-6 top teeth of the cog, and the shift is happening at the bottom, and the chain is being released only at the top very gently, you can shift under power. You can shift through 4-5 gears, however many your shifter will allow you to. If you are paranoid, you can only make sure that you are going to shift by one cog at a time and wait until the entire shift is completed, or the entire cycle is completed, and then shift to another cog. But in essence, you can shift under ridiculous amount of chain tension, because the shift is happening on the untensioned part of the cassette. Alright, now my second issue with this particular section of this video is that does Mr. Dunn follow his own advice, or his scriptwriter's advice? Because here's the thing. By its very nature, when you are switching gears at the front on a road bike from the big ring to the small ring, that implies quite a bit of cadence change if you're riding a compact, especially. Now, in case of a compact, which is an extreme example, I admit, but the change of cadence that you would need to apply to your tempo as you are going from the big ring to the small ring is approximately 50%. So if you're pushing 80 RPMs, now you have to do 120. Now even Mr. Dunn tells us that sudden change in cadence to the higher value might cause you to crash because you don't quite expect it to be so traumatic. Now of course you can compensate for this by switching gears at the back, but that would force you to ride on a cross chain because you're still on the flat course. Now Mr. Dunn, quite a few seconds before this, advises us to do that. Even his Di2 does not allow him to run something like 39 by 15 or 13, whatever. Point being, switching from the big ring to the small ring in order to compensate for the cadence change requires you to run the small combinations, which are quite mechanically problematic and most importantly least efficient gears you have. Now a more sensible way of doing this is that as you approach a climb, stay on the big ring because that's your primary driving gear, that's what you should be using. Use your cassette to adjust your speed, so as the incline increases you are going to be traveling up and up on the cassette up until any limit you are going to achieve, which is most likely either what Di2 will allow you to or the end of your cassette. And if you are at the edge, then switch to a smaller gear, and if it's necessary, adjust the speed using the cassette. Now why do that? First of all, you already know that riding on the cross chain isn't that much of an issue. Second thing, we know that switching gear under power isn't much of an issue. Third thing is that when you are on the big ring, the tension of your chain on the power section of your drivetrain is the smallest. The fourth thing is that most of the climbs can be actually conquered using the big combination, sometimes used, unless you know that you are going to be doing something like epic. So you can switch to a smaller gear, adjust your speed with the cassette, and away you go for an hour or two. And fifth, humans usually tolerate cadence changes much better when they are done on the lower speed. And sixth, because of fifth, cassettes are usually sequenced in a manner that clicking 1 or 2 or 3 times gives you a very coarse but very effective way of changing speeds during a climb. So if you are climbing and you are climbing something long or something hard, using 3 or 4 biggest cogs on the cassette is all that you need. So in essence, in most of your riding, in most of everyone's riding, if you are using the small ring, you are essentially only want to use it with the 4 largest cogs on the cassette. All the other situations, use the big ring and just use the entire cassettes. One bike can do it, so can you.
An easy way to find out if it's time to replace your chain is to simply pinch it here whilst it's in the big ring, and if you can get a gap there between the teeth and the chain, it's time for a change.
Pinching the chain on the big ring is something that would tell you something about the chain wear on a single speed. Or on a 5-speed bike, it would share the chain set with a single speed, and that would work under a condition that the ring is steel. Because just about every modern bicycle has the big ring and the small ring and every other ring, either shaped specifically to aid shifting, so to and from that ring, or they are made of aluminum, which wears pretty fast, which allows quite a bit of wiggle room for the chain, even when the chain is perfect working condition. This method is vastly inaccurate for modern bicycles. If you want to measure the wear of your chain, either buy a $5 chain tool or learn to measure your chain using a caliper. So that would be all of my objections to this video. I either have no opinion or don't disagree with the rest, whatever it was. I hope to see you on the next one. I hope I'm not going to get too much flack from people who are going to disagree very passionately. You know who you are. I hope you're going to subscribe to the channel, even if you just want to hate watch. And now I need to return to my work on fixing the climate change, because you people simply don't seem to get how to approach this problem.
Okay, we say this on GCN often, but rightly so. Clean your bike. Look after it, and it will look after you.
Let me start by saying something that's going to be controversial in the context I'm going to put it in. But your bike doesn't like water. More specifically, your bike doesn't know the difference between your morning or evening downpour and being lovingly caressed with sponge. Moisture is moisture. And moisture, especially one that is mixed with some sort of a detergent, which is essentially a solvent for a fat, is going to cause problems if it's allowed to seep into bearings or places which house some sort of grease. For example, rear hubs, bottom brackets, headsets. The worst thing you can do to your bike is to, after each ride, sprinkle it with water, especially one that's mixed with a detergent, and then rinse and store it somewhere warm. That's almost sure that some water is going to seep into bearings in all those interesting places and cause corrosion.